Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. We are at the final segment of today, and that segment, like I said before, we have done the tight ends for ESPN's Fantasy Rankings, and now we are looking at the rookies. This is one of the most exciting group of rookies we have ever seen come into the league, and it's highly reflected in this rankings. I'm kind of shocked at some of the names on this list being as high as they are, but that should be attributed to the amount of parity in terms of skill positions in this particular group. So let's get right on to it. At number one, obviously the son of a Hall of Famer has to be at number one. So yes, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. going into a Cardinals team that was looking for that number one wideout, as I kind of hinted at before. I think that Marvin Harrison Jr., while he hasn't been getting as much hype as some of the receivers going into the draft, I think that he is the best receiver, just being that weapon for Ohio State that Kyle McCord needed last year to get acclimated to the level of Big Ten football, just being that reliable target for Kyler Murray come the start of the season. I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is just going to be one of the better rookie tight ends, wideouts in this league for years to come. And so I think that this well-deserved. I think that he needs the hype that he has deserved in the past, being one of the best receivers coming out of college that the NFL has seen in quite some time. And so I think that number one ranking in ESPN's rookie rankings is well-deserved. Look for him to be a huge player in the league for years to come. And number two, I think this is highly reflected on the fact that his quarterback has not had a player of his caliber in his wide receiver core in quite some time, and that is Malik Nabers. He immediately becomes the number one wideout for Daniel Jones. I think that this is more a reflection on the fact that the Giants expect a lot more out of Daniel Jones rather than is on Malik Nabers, because obviously coming into this, Nabers is going to be the number one wideout in terms of targets for ESPN. That does not mean that Daniel Jones' production immediately is reflected by that. I think that this ranking is mainly due to the fact that Malik Nabers will suddenly become a number one wideout in the system, and that is why ESPN ranks him so highly. That being said, I think that he is one of the more less coveted players in terms of the wide receiver class, in terms of that high end of that receiver class especially. And so I feel as if this might be a too high a ranking for a player whose quarterback has too many questions, whose other wide receiver core members have a lot of questions surrounding them. There's a lot of pressure to put on a young player like Malik Nabers, but I'm looking for him to have a nice season. He could turn out to be a steal in my opinion, but I would be wary of drafting him as high as he should, as ESPN thinks he should be drafted, just because of the fact that that's a lot of pressure to put on a rookie wideout. Coming in at number three, probably the guy in the best situation for any rookie, Rome Odunze. I think that Rome Odunze coming in with Caleb as his new quarterback for the Chicago Bears, coming in, expectations will be off him, whereas in terms of Malik Nabers, more expectations and more spotlights will be on him as well. I think that Rome Odunze will benefit from that. In terms of traits, I think that he is one of the best in the class. I think that his body control is incredible, his contested catch abilities are incredible, and look for Caleb Williams to want to throw the ball early and often to him. I think that the pressure is off him. I think the pressure is more on Caleb Williams and the pieces that the Chicago Bears added around him rather than Rome Odunze himself. So I think that he could be a steal from fantasy draft time, mainly based on the fact that Caleb Williams wants to have that rookie-on-rookie connection to get himself acclimated to the league. I just think that the Chicago Bears as a whole is a very exciting offense to look at, and I think that Rome Odunze could be one of the benefactors of that. Coming in at number four, I think this guy is rated too highly. I love him as a Texas fan, but coming off an injury, I don't think he should be as high as this, and that is Jonathan Brooks for the Carolina Panthers. Now, obviously, moving from a place where he was highly coveted to a team that needs more offensive oomph all around. I think that Jonathan Brooks' production will level off a little bit, and especially since he's coming off such a kind of harrowing injury as an ACL injury, I just think that Jonathan Brooks is going to be viewed as someone who might come on later in the year, but in terms of earlier on in the year, I do not expect Jonathan Brooks to have that level of production. Obviously, the Carolina Panthers are going to want to be careful with him, transitioning him from college to the NFL. Obviously, this past season for Jonathan Brooks was a breakout season for him as well, so who knows if he gets transitioned to the NFL as quickly as possible off that injury, if he is acclimated to the amount of hits that he's going to face as a player for the Carolina Panthers, especially due to the fact that they don't have that system that they have down in Texas where he was better protected. So overall, I just think that Jonathan Brooks a little bit too high in my opinion. At number 5, one of the more wild card type players on this list, and Brock Bowers for the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, Brock Bowers is such a versatile player. Like, how can we describe a tight end like Brock Bowers? Just incredible power, incredible athlete, all around, just an incredible player to have. But the fact that he is on the Raiders gives me pause, seeing as to how I don't think Antonio Pierce wants to focus on the passing attack as much. I think that they view Brock Bowers more as a utility player, a more gadget-style player for their system. Obviously, they're not focused on getting good production out of their quarterbacks, so I view Brock Bowers' yardage to come from more kind of like trick plays, gadget plays. But ultimately, I think he's going to be an interesting athlete to look at. I think that he could prove to be a steal, but let's just see how his game translates to the NFL, seeing as to how Georgia used him and how Las Vegas will use him. Coming in at number 6, I think this guy could prove to be higher due to the fact that his status in this wide receiver room is elevated due to the fact that there are some high caliber players leading this wide receiver core, and that is Brian Thomas. I think that Brian Thomas' his status will get elevated mainly due to the fact that he's now the either number 1 or number 2 wideout for the Jacksonville Jaguars moving forward. I think that he certainly could be higher than Neighbors come the end of the year, but ultimately I think that Brian Thomas, viewed as one of the more less coveted players in the upper echelon of wide receivers in this class. However, I do think that Brian Thomas, for some points of the draft process, was viewed as the number 1 wire in this class, and I think he goes to a team that certainly benefits from having him, as they lost Calvin Ridley. I think that Doug Peterson will certainly want to incorporate him. Trevor Lawrence is certainly welcoming his presence on the squad. So ultimately, I think his stats will be inflated come the end of the year, mainly just the fact that he can be seen as the number 2 wideout on the Jags, and he could be seen as a wide receiver 5, at least in terms of the rookie class, in my opinion. Coming in at number 7, probably the most electric and exciting player in this draft class, going into the Kansas City Chiefs, Xavier Worthy. I think that Xavier Worthy is probably one of the more underrated wide receivers in this class, mainly due to the fact that players with his amount of speed mainly don't translate to the NFL. But if there's any team that can immediately incorporate him into their system, it is the Kansas City Chiefs. They're looking at Xavier Worthy as the next Tyreek Hill. Obviously, his speed is one thing, but his catching ability is one thing. He limited his amount of drops last year for Texas, and I think that he will transition to the NFL very efficiently because of the system that he's in. Look for him to be involved in every facet of the offense, whether as a gadget player in the slot, on the outside. He's a very exciting athlete, mainly due to his one trait above all else, and that is speed. I think that Xavier Worthy, come the end of the year, could be looking at the wide receiver 3 position in this rookie class. I think he's going to be a steal for anyone. I think he's the most exciting player in this draft class. I think coming in at number 8, one of the more underrated players in this draft class, in Legette, Xavier Legette. I think that Xavier Legette, coming out of college, is highly underrated. obviously moving to a team in the Carolina Panthers, I believe, that would highly covet his presence. I think that Xavier Legette as a whole is going to be one of those receivers that is more appreciated for his more developed traits in more areas than, say, like a Xavier Worthy, who's only attributed to speed. I think he's very valuable, and I think he's very underrated at the number 8 position. Could be seen as wide receiver 6, in my opinion. And rounding out the rookie rankings, the 2 top quarterbacks taken 1 and 2 respectively, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. I think that obviously wide receivers in this draft class are more coveted, and that's reflected. But these QBs I expect to put up a lot of points, especially Caleb Williams in that new look Bears offense with that position group. Jaden Daniels as well. Don't rule out the Washington Commanders. I think that Jaden Daniels has a very nice setup for him as well, with a lot of interesting pieces around him. So these 2 young rookie quarterbacks will look to get off the mark. But that is going to do it for today's edition of GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show. It supports us a lot. It means a lot to our network and to me and my fellow podcasters. Leave a tip and donation at the link gsmc.cloud. But that is it. I've been Christopher Shepard. Thank you guys for tuning in. Happy Memorial Day to all. And that should just about end the show.